Welcome to my American History Notes. I'm going to be talking about a very important person in American history with regard to religious liberty, a man named Roger Williams. So these are my conclusions from my study of American history. You may not agree with them, but at least you should know about the people I talk about and the events that I mention. Puritan minister Roger Williams, an important figure with regard to religious liberty in America, had come into contact with the separatist congregations that I mentioned previously through his relationship with his employers, although it's unclear exactly how this happened, and I find many conflicting accounts of his relationship with the General Baptists of the Gainsborough congregation. Williams felt called to New England, and because of his credentials, having studied theology, classics, and languages at Cambridge, was welcomed in Boston to preach. He left with his wife for New England in 1630. Boston in the 1630s was ruled by a court of 25 to 30 deputies chosen from membership in the Congregational Church. The Boston court was a church court, a perfect marriage between the church and the magistrates who enforced the law. William's separatist viewpoint that the Church of England was dead wrong and that only separation from it was proper put him on a collision course with the authorities. While back in England, and the men of the Boston court would have been philosophical allies of Williams, but not in America, where they believed they had established the quote city of God or quote kingdom of heaven on earth. Back in England, Roger Williams, Thomas Hooker, and the preacher John Cotton had together attended a famous meeting in Sempringham. According to historian James Ernst, these men debated theology on the trip, and their fundamental differences were laid down. The famous John Winthrop, previously mentioned, would go on to say that Roger Williams, quote, hath broached new and dangerous opinions against the authority of the magistrates. His opinions were not new, however. The ideal of some Anabaptist groups that human government was inherently evil, dominated by Satan, 2 Corinthians 4:4, particularly when it attempted to enforce by temporal punishment church doctrine, was not new. Law and human authority was to be respected and followed, Romans 13, when it did not conflict with God's law, Acts 5:29. In the New World, William's seemingly anti-authoritarian stance branded him as, quote, divinely mad. He moved around preaching at various churches, always standing precariously at the edge of the law. In 1634, King Charles I gave a commission to Archbishop Laud and others to revoke all charters given to the new colonies, and new ones were written up. Permission was granted for tithes to be collected as taxes for the support of clergy. In other words, the preacher would be paid as an employee of the state, with fines, imprisonment, or death being imposed as punishment for failure to do so. In 1635, the Boston court demanded that all men aged 16 and older had to take the oath of the freemen, which on the surface appeared to separate themselves from control by the Church of England, but in reality made them abide by the laws of New England in both civil and religious matters. You had to be a member of the Congregational Church. One became a church member by being baptized as an infant. This church-state marriage remained in place in Massachusetts for over 160 years, even past the American Revolution. The results of this were homes stolen, property confiscated, and banishment. There were beatings and imprisonments, whippings and hangings. Roger Williams preached against taking the oath and was called before the Boston court in April 1635, but refused to retract his statements. Now we'll continue with Roger Williams, talking about his opposition to the law of patents, very important idea. The next time, I thank you for being here. Take care.